Welcome to another deep dive. This time we're asking, grifter or gifted?
Ooh, good one.
We're diving into Han van Meegeren. He's this Dutch painter who, well, he basically pulled off one of the biggest art forgery scams ever. Fooled a lot of people.
Yeah, including some top Nazis.
Exactly. So you sent over a bunch of stuff about him, like biographies and art history analyses. Oh, and even a movie. So let's start at the beginning. Van Meegeren, right? He was born way back in 1889 in the Netherlands.
Yep.
And he actually studied architecture, but it sounds like he was always really into painting. He even had some success copying Frans Hals.
Yeah, he was really good technically, but when he tried to do his own thing, the art critics just tore him apart.
Oh, yeah.
They just saw him as a copycat, nothing more. There's this one review, they actually called his work art Bolshevism.
Art Bolshevism?
I know, right? And get this, they said it was like the work of a bunch of woman haters and Negro lovers.
Wow. That's harsh.
It is. And that kind of rejection, well, a lot of people think that's what really pushed him towards forgery. Like he wanted to get back at them.
Prove them wrong.
Exactly. Like, you think I'm just a copycat. I'll show you what a real copycat can do.
So that's kind of the setup. But how does he go from, like, projected artist to master forger? And we're talking Vermeer here, one of the greats. I mean, they had ways to tell if a painting was real back then, right?
Oh, yeah, they had their methods. But Van Meegeren was, like, really meticulous. He knew his stuff. He was playing the long game.
Okay.
Like, he went deep into Vermeer's techniques. We're talking pigments from the 17th century. He even figured out how to age the paintings, bake them in ovens and stuff, use this special glue that would pass all their tests.
So it wasn't just about looking like a Vermeer. He was recreating the whole process.
Exactly. Oh, and there's this one detail that's kind of crazy. He used bakelite.
Bakelite?
Yeah, it's this synthetic resin. It wasn't even invented until, like, the 20th century.
Wait, so he's using a modern material to make an old painting?
Yeah. The thing is, when you treat bakelite a certain way, it can actually look like something that's aged naturally.
Oh, sneaky.
Yeah, and back then, they didn't have the tools to know the difference.
So he was exploiting that gap in their knowledge. Smart.
Really smart. He was always one step ahead.
But, okay, why Vermeer? There were other Dutch masters he could have chosen.
True. There are a few reasons, I think. First off, Vermeers were super rare. Back then, there were only like 35 known paintings.
So instantly valuable.
Right, and collectors were going crazy for them. And then there's Vermeer's style. It's very specific, you know, the light, the domestic scenes. Van Meegeren must have felt like he could really nail it.
I see. So it was a calculated choice, kind of targeting a master whose work was, I guess, right for the picking.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It wasn't just talent. He understood the art market.
Knew what people wanted, what they'd pay for.
Exactly. And I think his biggest win, his most successful con, was this painting called The Supper at Emmaus.
Oh, I read about that one. It was even authenticated by, what was his name? Bredius. He was like the top Vermeer expert at the time.
Abraham Bredius, yeah. He even said it was the best Vermeer ever seen.
Wow.
I know. And that just sent the price through the roof. Ended up selling for like millions in today's money. Imagine everyone's faces when the truth came out.
Oh, I bet. Okay, so we've talked about, his motives and how he did it, but how did it all fall apart?
Well, like a lot of stories about deception, it's usually something totally unexpected that brings the house down. In Van Meegeren's case, it was World War II.
World War II. I mean, what does that have to do with art forgery? This is where it gets really crazy, right?
Yeah. It turns out that one of Van Meegeren's Vermeers ended up in the hands of Hermann Göring.
Göring. Hitler's right-hand man.
The one and only.
Wow. He was playing with fire.
He was. And after the war, when they were going through all of Göring's stolen art, this Vermeer kind of stood out. The Dutch authorities, they wanted to know how it ended up with a Nazi leader.
I'm guessing they weren't too happy when they found out it was Van Meegeren.
Not exactly. He was arrested, but not for forgery. They thought he was collaborating with the Nazis.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was a serious charge back then.
So what did he do?
Well, he basically said, hold on, that's not a real Vermeer. I painted it.
He confessed to avoid a worse sentence.
Yep. Pretty risky move.
I bet.
Of course, at first, no one believed him. It just sounded too crazy. So to prove it, he agreed to paint another Vermeer, but this time live in the courtroom.
A live forgery demo in the middle of his trial.
That's exactly what happened. He wanted to show everyone how he did it, how he could fool even the experts.
That's wild.
And he did it. He pulled it off.
So the con man became the star witness.
Pretty much. The whole thing became a media circus. In the end, he was convicted, but only for the forgery.
So not for being a Nazi collaborator.
Right. He only got a year in prison.
Wow. What a story.
It is. But it doesn't end there.
Right, because now I really want to know, was he a genius or a grifter? He obviously had the talent, but he used it to deceive people.
That's the big question, isn't it? And that's what we'll be talking about next.
So we're back, and still trying to figure out Han van Meegeren. Was he a grifter? A genius?
Well, it's tricky.
It is. I mean, last we left off, he was literally painting a fake Vermeer right there in the courtroom.
Yeah, talk about a mic drop. I mean, can you imagine? He basically exposed the whole art world, right?
Yeah.
Showed how easily they could be tricked.
Right. And I bet some people were not happy about that.
Oh, I'm sure there were some red faces. But you have to remember, this was a guy who felt like the art world had done him wrong.
Rejected him.
Totally. So maybe this was his way of, like, getting revenge, showing them they weren't as smart as they thought they were.
So is that where the whole misunderstood genius idea comes in? Was he trying to make a point about how we decide what's good art and what's not?
It's possible. I mean, some people say he was a brilliant artist no matter what. Like, even if he was faking it, he still had to have incredible skill to pull it off.
Right. Yeah. To be able to capture Vermeer's style like that, it's almost like he was having a conversation with Vermeer, but through, forgery.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to think about it. And some art historians even say that his forgeries are more valuable than just regular copies because they show how another artist interprets a master's work.
Right. I see what you mean. But then there's the other side of it. He made a lot of money from this. A lot.
Oh, yeah. Millions. And that's hard to ignore. He wasn't exactly a struggling artist. He was playing on people's desires, their greed, I guess. The wealthy collectors who wanted to own a Vermeer, no matter the cost.
So maybe it's not so simple. Maybe he was both. Talented, for sure, but also a bit of a con man. I mean, revenge, money, maybe even a love of art itself, all mixed together.
I mean, people are complicated. It's rarely just one thing or the other.
And that's what makes this story so interesting, right? It's a mystery, a morality tale, all wrapped up in one. And it makes you think we can be fooled, even when it comes to something like art.
Absolutely. And that brings up a really fascinating question. How did he fool so many experts? I mean, these were people who dedicated their lives to Vermeer. They should have known better.
We talked about how Van Meegeren was playing on what they expected to see, what they wanted a Vermeer to look like. But there has to be more to it than that.
Yeah. I mean, there's a human element to art authentication.
Right.
These experts, they're looking for certain things, but they're also influenced by, their own biases, their desire to discover something big.
Maybe they wanted to believe it was real. I mean, Van Meegeren was good at telling a story, creating this whole backstory for his paintings.
He was. He understood how to make something seem authentic, how to give it value.
It's like the placebo effect. If you believe something is real, it changes how you see it.
Right. And that's why it's important to think critically, even when it comes to experts.
To question things.
Yeah, because we can all be fooled. And then there's the Nazi thing.
Right. He actually sold a fake Vermeer to the Nazis.
Yeah.
Kind of ironic, right?
Totally. It's like he was getting one over on them. Makes it seem like, I don't know, a bit of a folk hero to some people.
Yeah, but he also profited from them, so it's not so clear-cut. It's all very complicated. You said there was a movie about this, right?
Yeah.
Does the movie try to sort all of this out?
It does, to a point. It's called The Last Vermeer, and it focuses on his trial after the war.
Okay.
And it shows him as a pretty complex character. Like, he's definitely a con man, but you can also see him as this artist who's been wronged.
So they don't just make him the bad guy.
Not exactly. But I've heard some people say it romanticizes him a bit too much, makes him seem more heroic than he really was.
Which makes sense, right?
Yeah.
It's a good story. People like a good story. But it's interesting how there are so many different ways to interpret this whole thing.
It is. And I think that's why people are still so fascinated by him, even today. He makes us question what's real, what's fake, how we decide what art is worth.
And that's really what we're talking about here, right? Is he a grifter or a genius? No easy answer.
Nope, definitely not. But his story makes us think, and that's a good thing.
Okay, so we've talked about Van Meegeren, the guy, the forger, the, the legend. But what does it all mean for the art world? Like his whole story.
Yeah, it's definitely more than just one guy, right? It's like he pulled back the curtain and showed how the whole system works, or, maybe how it doesn't work.
Right. I mean, he was basically playing them all. Like, it makes you wonder if they kind of wanted to be fooled,
Mm-hmm.
Especially when a painting could be worth so much money.
I think there's some truth to that. Back then, it was all about these experts, these connoisseurs. They decided what was real and what wasn't.
Based on what they could see.
Yeah, like brushstrokes and stuff. But Van Meegeren showed that you can fake that. And
Yeah.
then there's the provenance, the history of who owned a painting.
Right, that's supposed to prove it's real. But you could fake that too, right?
Exactly. He was really good at figuring out how to make something seem authentic. And the art world back then, I mean, they relied on that trust.
So if someone like Bredius said a painting was real, then it was real.
Pretty much. And the more valuable it became, the less anyone questioned it.
So what about now? I mean, we have all this technology, X-rays, all that stuff. You'd think it would be harder to fool people today.
Yeah, you'd think so, but the forgers are getting better too. They're using the same technology. It's like a cat and mouse game.
So it's still possible, even with all the science. We can still be tricked.
I think so, because in the end, it's still people making the decisions. And people can make mistakes or, be influenced by other things.
Okay, so what can we learn from all of this? I mean, how can we protect ourselves from being fooled, not just in the art world, but in general?
I think the biggest thing is to be skeptical. Don't just take someone's word for it. Do your own research.
Ask questions.
Yeah, and look for evidence.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to challenge what people are telling you, even if they're supposed to be an expert.
Because anyone can be wrong.
Right. Or they could have their own reasons for wanting you to believe something.
So I guess that's the takeaway from Han van Meegeren.
It's part of it, yeah. I mean, his story is a good reminder that things aren't always what they seem. And that's something to keep in mind no matter what you're looking at, whether it's a painting or, anything else.
Right. Question everything. Don't be afraid to look a little deeper.
Exactly.
Well, that's been another fascinating deep dive. A little twisty, a little bit mind-bending, but definitely fascinating. Thanks for taking us through it.
My pleasure. Always happy to talk about art, even the fake kind.
And thanks everyone for listening. We'll be back next time with another deep dive into, well, who knows? Maybe another grifter, maybe another genius. Until then, stay curious.